Man, this is exciting. Um, we're continuing. Hi, welcome to the stream, everyone. We're continuing off with our Worm reread on Interlude 1, and then we'll be moving on to Arc 2. And, man, I'm excited to talk about this chapter for a couple of reasons. One thing, well, I think we should just jump in real quick. How's everyone doing, though? How's the stream going? Um, you guys doing good? Alright. So let's start off with interlude one, and we'll just go through it. It's not like it's an interesting interlude because there's something really interesting about this interlude when you consider the context of everything else, like everything else that happens in the story, and we'll be getting into that. So interlude one. We don't know how long he had been there, suspended in the air above the Atlantic Ocean. On May 20th, 1982, an ocean liner was crossing from Plymouth to Boston when a passenger spotted him. He was naked, his arms to his sides, his long hair blowing in the wind as he stood in the sky, nearly 100 feet above the gently cresting waves. His skin and hair can only be described as a burnished gold. With neither body hair nor clothes to cover him, it is said, he seemed almost artificial. After a discussion including a passenger and crew, the liner detoured to get closer. It was a sunny day, and passengers crowded to the railings to get a better look. As if sharing their curiosity, the figure drew closer as well. His expression was unchanging, but witnesses at the scene reported that he appeared deeply sad. "I thought he was going to crack his facade and cry any moment," said Grace Lands. "But when I reached out and touched his fingertips, I was the one who burst into tears. That boat trip was a final journey for me. I had cancer, and I wasn't brave enough to face it. Can't believe I'm admitting this in front of a camera, but I was going back to Boston, where I was born, to end things myself. After I met him, I changed my mind. Didn't matter anyways. I went to a doctor, and he said there was no sign I ever had the disease. My brother Andrew Hawk was the last passenger to make any sort of contact with him, I remember. He climbed up onto the railing, and, almost falling off, he clasped the hand of the Golden Man. The rest of us had to grab onto him to keep him from falling. Whatever happened left him with a quiet awe. When the man with the golden skin flew away, my brother stayed silent. The rest of the way to Boston, my brother didn't say a word. When we docked, and the spell finally broke, my brother babbled his excitement to reporters like a child. The Golden Man would reappear several more times in the coming months and years. At some point, he donned clothing. At first, a sheet worn over one shoulder and pinned at either side of the waist, then more conventional clothes. In 1999, he donned the white bodysuit that he still wears today. For more than a decade, we have wondered, where did our Golden Man get these things? Who was he in contact with? Periodically at first, then with an increasing frequency, the Golden Man started to intervene in times of crisis. For events as small as a car accident, as great as natural disasters, he has arrived and used his abilities to save us. A flash of light to freeze water reinforcing a levee stressed by a hurricane. A terrorist act averted. A serial murderer caught. A volcano quelled. Miracles, it was said. His pace increased, perhaps because he was still learning what he could do, perhaps because he was getting a greater sense of where he was needed. By the middle of the 1990s, he was traveling from crisis to crisis, flying faster than the speed of sound. In 15 years, he has not rested. He has been known to speak just once in 30 years. After extinguishing widespread fire in Alexandrovsk, he paused to survey the scene and be sure no blazes remained. A reporter spoke to him and asked, "Tell thee, what are you?" Shocking the world, caught on camera in a scene replayed innumerable times, he answered in a voice that sounded as though it might never have uttered a sound before. Barely audible, he told her, "Scion." It became the name we used for him. Ironic, because we took a word that meant descendant and used it to name the first of many superpowered individuals, parahumans, to appear across Earth. Just 5 years after Scion's first appearance, the superheroes emerged from the cover of rumor and secrecy to show themselves to the public. Though the villains followed soon after, it was the heroes who shattered any illusions of the parahumans being divine figures. In 1989, attempting to quell a riot over a basketball game in Michigan, the superhero known to the public as Vickery stepped in, only to be clubbed over the head. He died not long after of a brain embolism. Later, he would be revealed to be Andrew Hawk. The golden age of the parahumans was thus short-lived. They were not the deific figures they appeared to be. Parahumans were, after all, people with powers, and people are flawed at their core. Government agencies took a firmer hand, and state. The television flicked off, and the screen went black, cutting the documentary off mid-sentence. Danny Hebert sighed and sat down on the bed, only to stand just a moment later and resume pacing. It was 3:15 in the morning, and his daughter Taylor was not in her bedroom. So, man, oh man, let's get into this for a second here. Yeah, I'm just gonna control F. Yeah, I'm just gonna control F bedroom so I don't lose my place. Let's talk about Scion and Danny and all this stuff. What I really like about this is the ties it has with like just the Jesus symbolism all over everything. First of all, that's like it's really great how like religion. This feels like it is. It really feels like you get that atmosphere of this is a religious figure, and especially in these first few moments where he performs miracles like curing cancer and stuff like that. But just man, oh man, it's really interesting because it feels like this is the first time in Worm where we're getting some like okay, this is lore that's unique to the world of Worm. It doesn't feel like it's something that other superhero stories have done before, and it doesn't like, and it's like something that's in its own way interesting just on its own. But once you've read through the whole story, it becomes really interesting how we are introduced to Scion and Danny in the same chapter, in the same scene even, and just man oh man are there parallels you can draw between those two characters given what you come to learn about them over the course of the series. Danny and Scion have a lot of similarities. They both are overcome by depression because of their dead spouses. They both they both seemingly neglect their children, in the case of Scion with the shards and Danny with Taylor, where they don't give them the attention they need, and it ends up and they end up going down paths they didn't expect. In the case of Danny being Taylor becoming a supervillain, and in the case of Scion being freaking Queen Administrator and Taylor working together to stop him. And like, holy shit, that's great. That people have pointed out that technically you can say that Eden dies in something that could be analogous to a car crash, a car accident, which is a parallel between Eden and Annette. That's really interesting, and funny. I don't know. It's like it feels so incredibly intentional, and yet it's something so early on in the story. Like just the introduction of hey, here's this mysterious character, and the seeds of the end of the world and all that shit have been right there from the very beginning. It's in Interlude 1. I suppose it also is a good chance to talk about interludes and how Wildbow handles them, and also a bit more about how point of view is handled in Worm and Ward, where it's really interesting to me that we get chapters that are from other characters' perspectives, and that they always are from like a specific character's perspective, more or less, with like a couple of specific exceptions. And the way it works is really interesting because it's like we have a third person perspective, so we know this is not the same main character as the one we had in the first, as the one we had in the rest of the story. We typically only get one interlude per character, um, with exceptions for characters with like multiple subsequent interludes or interludes in the same arc that form like a series. In Ward, that happens more. I don't think it happens at any point in Ward, and it's just a really clever way to build the world. Um, I feel like the way that point of view is handled is also really interesting because we get the same rules that apply to Taylor in her chapters apply to the characters in these chapters, where everything that we are told through the text are things that the character believes to be true, but that aren't necessarily true. And that in itself holds a lot of interesting implications for how things can be handled. And they play around with it a lot. Man, there's so much stuff I love. The difference between the "I'm going to let you go" part in particular is one of my favorite moments of this. But just man, oh man. Let's keep going. Danny ran his hands through his hair, which was thinned enough at the top to be closer to baldness than not. He liked to be the first to arrive at work, watching everyone arrive, having them know he was there for them. So he usually went to bed early. He'd turn in at 10 in the evening, give or take depending on what was on TV. Only tonight, a little past midnight, he'd been disturbed from restless sleep when he had felt rather than heard the shutting of the back door of the house just below his bedroom. He had checked on his daughter and he'd found her room empty. So he had waited for his daughter to return for 3 hours. Countless times he had glanced out the window, hoping to see Taylor coming in. For the 20th time, he felt the urge to ask his wife for help, for advice, for support. But her side of the bed was empty, and it had been for some time. Daily, it seemed, he was struck by the urge to call her cell phone. He knew it was stupid. She wouldn't pick up. And if he dwelt on that for too long, he became angry at her, which just made him feel worse. He wondered, even as he knew the answer, why he hadn't gotten Taylor a cell phone. Danny didn't know what his daughter was doing, what would drive her to go out at night. She wasn't the type. He could tell himself that most fathers felt that way about their daughters, but at the same time he knew. Taylor wasn't social. She didn't go to parties. She wouldn't drink. She wasn't even that interested in champagne when they celebrated the New Year together. Two ominous possibilities kept nagging at him, both too believable. The first was that Taylor had gone out for fresh air, or even for a run. She wasn't happy, especially at school, he knew, and exercise was her way of working through it. He could see her doing it on a Sunday night, with a fresh week at school looming. He liked that her running made her feel better about herself, that she seemed to be doing it in a reasonable, healthy way. He just hated that she had to do it here, in this neighborhood. Because here, a skinny girl in her mid-teens was an easy target for attack, a mugging or worse. He couldn't even articulate the worst of the possibilities in his own thoughts without feeling physically sick. If she had gone out at 11 in the evening for a run and hadn't come back by 3 in the morning, then it meant something had happened. He glanced out the window again, at that corner of the house where the pool of illumination beneath the streetlight would let him see her approaching. Nothing. The second possibility wasn't much better. He knew Taylor was being bullied. Danny had found that out in January, when his little girl had been pulled out of school and taken to the hospital. Not the emergency room, but the psychiatric ward. She wouldn't say by whom, but under the influence of the drugs they had given her to calm down, she admitted she was being victimized by bullies, using the plural to give him a clue that it was a they and not a he or she. She hadn't mentioned it, the incident or the bullying, since. If he pushed, she only tensed up and grew more withdrawn. He had resigned himself to letting her reveal the details in her own time, but months had passed without any hints or clues being offered. So, man, oh man, it's really interesting because I just said like Danny's kind of negligent, but it's really not that much as there's not a lot he can do, and he doesn't know how to talk to Taylor about bullying without without closing her off to it. It's really interesting to me because it's this situation where there's nothing he can really do, but it feels like he still kind of comes off as having failed her, and in her eyes even, maybe. And it's like, what is he supposed to do? I don't know. It's really interesting to me though. Um, yeah, this chapter really makes you feel for Danny a whole lot. It really makes you empathize with him, and I think that's a really good thing. Um, just like I feel like this chapter is actually kind of crucial to getting people to like the story as a whole, because it feels like there's not a whole lot that's super interesting that's been going on in the mainline chapters, and up until like arc 3, it doesn't. Well, no, arc 2 still has some really cool stuff, but it's just like, man, oh man, is it just it's just great that we get this little chapter about, hey, this is a case of the parent of the superhero who's worrying about his child and he doesn't know what's up with her. And it's the first instance of, hey, Taylor should probably have told her dad about her powers, or something, or anything, because it feels like not telling your parents that you have superpowers and are going out and being a superhero is like the worst thing you can do to your parent in a lot of ways in this superhero world. So yeah, there's precious little Danny could do on the subject either. He had threatened to sue the school after his daughter had been taken to the hospital, and the school board had responded by settling, paying her hospital bills and promising they would look out for her to prevent such events from occurring in the future. It was a feeble promise made by chronically overworked staff, and it didn't do a thing to ease his worries. His efforts to have her change schools had been stubbornly countered with rules and regulations about the maximum travel times a student was allowed to have between home and a given school. The only other school within a reasonable distance of Taylor's place of residence was Arcadia High, and it was already desperately overcrowded with more than 200 students on a list requiring admittance. With all that in mind, when his daughter disappeared until the middle of the night, he couldn't shake the idea that the bullies might have lured her out with blackmail, threats, or empty promises. He only knew about the one incident, the one that had landed her in the hospital, but it had been grotesque. It had been implied, but never elaborated on, that more had been going on. He could imagine these boys or girls that were tormenting his daughter, egging one another on as they came up with more creative ways to humiliate or harm her. Taylor hadn't said as much aloud, but whatever had been going on had been mean, persistent, and threatening enough that Emma, Taylor's closest friend for years, had stopped spending time with her. It galled him. Yeah. This is where a lot of it sets in, where it's like, yeah, Danny doesn't know a lot about what's going on. He doesn't know that Emma is one of the bullies, which is like Jesus Christ. But yeah, yeah. And this is where it feels like, how can you repair this relationship even when there's so little communication going on? Impotent. Danny was helpless where it counted. There was no action he could take. His one call to the police at 2 in the morning had only earned him a tired explanation that the police couldn't act or look for her without something more to go on. If his daughter was still gone after 12 hours, he'd been told, he should call them again. All he could do was wait and pray with his heart in his throat that the phone wouldn't ring, a police officer or nurse on the other end ready to tell him what had happened to his daughter. The slightest of vibrations in the house marked the escape of the warm air in the house to the cold outdoors, and there was a muffled whoosh as the kitchen door shut again. Danny Hebert felt a thrill of relief coupled with abject fear. If he went downstairs to find his daughter, would he find her hurting or hurt? Or would his presence make things worse? Her own father seeing her at her most vulnerable after humiliation at the hands of bullies. She had told him, in every way except articulating it aloud, that she didn't want that. She had pleaded with him, with body language and averted eye contact, unfinished sentences and things left unsaid, not to ask, not to push, not to see, when it came to the bullying. He couldn't say why exactly. Home was an escape from that, he'd suspected, and if he recognized the bullying, made it a reality here, maybe she wouldn't have that relief from it. Perhaps it was shame, but his daughter didn't want him to see her like that, didn't want to be that weak in front of him. He really hoped that wasn't the case. So he ran his fingers through his hair once more, and sat down at the corner of the bed, elbows on his knees, hands on his head, and stared at his closed bedroom door. His ears were peeled for the slightest clue. The house was old, and it hadn't been a high-quality building when it had been new, so the walls were thin and the structure prone to making noise at every opportunity. There was the faintest sound of a door closing downwards. The bathroom? It wouldn't be the basement door, with no reason for her to go down there, and he couldn't imagine it was a closet, because after 2 or 3 minutes, the same door opened and closed again. It wouldn't be the basement door. It's not like she's going and hiding her superhero costume or anything. After something banged on the kitchen counter, there was little but the occasional groan of floorboards. 5 or 10 minutes after she had come in, there was the rhythmic creak of the stairs as she ascended. Aw, man, it's okay. Welcome to the stream. I got so engrossed in it, I forgot to hit the start recording button, so I've got to download this stream from Twitch to re-upload it to YouTube. But yeah, welcome to the stream. I was talking a bit about Scion and Danny and how the two have a lot of similarities between them. That it's really cool that they're both introduced in the same chapter, and it really gives you a sense of, hey, Wildbow didn't plan out all of Worm from the start, because that's ludicrous. But holy shit, did he already know a lot about what the status of things were, like even from the beginning? Or he's just really smart with turning his stuff he's already written into foreshadowing. Because, man oh man. After something banged on the kitchen counter, there was little but the occasional groan of floorboards. 5 or 10 minutes in, after she had come in... Ooh. That sounds pretty cool. 5 or 10 minutes after she had come in, there was the rhythmic creak of the stairs as she ascended. Danny thought about clearing his throat to let her know he was awake and available should she knock on his door, but decided against it. He was being cowardly, he thought, as if clearing of his throat would give reality to his fears. Her door shut carefully, almost inaudibly, with the slightest tap of door on door frame. Danny stood, abruptly, opening his door, ready to cross the hall and knock on her door, to verify that his daughter was okay. He was stopped by the smell of jam and toast. She had made a late-night snack. It filled him with relief. He couldn't imagine his daughter, after being mugged, tormented, or humiliated, coming home to have toast with jam as a snack. Taylor was okay, or at least okay enough to be left alone. He let out a shuddering sigh of relief and retreated to his room to sit on the bed. I do think that he is really smart with the bullying. I think it's really interesting. It feels very similar to Armsmaster, where Armsmaster is a character who's really, he's, doing everything right, but not quite right for Taylor's exact situation, where he's pushing her to join the wards, and he's pushing her to not take the credit. And it's like, that's stuff you should be doing. I've just realized that this YouTuber I've been talking about for several consecutive pumps isn't some YouTuber I've never heard of. It's a YouTuber it made up. Okay. I don't know what that means. I don't think I understand the concept, the context there, but okay. AI? Okay. Has Kizuna I taken over the world? Is that what's happening? Okay. But yeah, Danny there's similarities with Armsmaster where it feels like he's doing really good, He's doing really good. He's doing really good. And then, oh shit, messed up horribly. Because, man, oh man. Well, I don't know about that. Armfaster, it feels like in the second meeting, he kind of starts, like, going in, like, oh, this is the wrong approach. So, let's see. He let out a shuddering sigh of relief and retreated to his room to sit on the bed. Relief became anger. He was angry at Taylor for making him worry, and then not even going out of her way to let him know she was okay. He felt a smoldering resentment towards the city for having neighborhoods and people he couldn't trust his daughter to. He hated the bullies that preyed on his daughter. Underlying it all was frustration with himself. Danny Hebert was the one person he could control in all of this, and Danny Hebert had failed to do anything that mattered. He hadn't gotten answers, hadn't stopped the bullies, hadn't protected his daughter. Worst of all was the idea that this might have happened before, with him simply sleeping through it rather than laying awake. He stopped himself from walking into his daughter's room, from shouting at her and demanding answers, even if it was what he wanted more than anything. Where had she been? What had she been doing? Was she hurt? Who were these people that were tormenting her? He knew that by confronting her and getting angry at her, he would do more harm than good, would threaten to sever any bond of trust they had forged between them. Danny's father had been a powerful, heavy-set man, and Danny hadn't gotten any of those genes. Danny had been a nerd when the term was still young in popular culture. Stick-thin, awkward, short-sighted, glasses, bad fashion sense. What he had inherited was his father's famous temper. It was quick to rise and startling in its intensity. Unlike his father, Danny had only ever hit someone in anger twice, both times when he was much younger. That said, just like his father, he could and would go off on tirades that would leave people shaking. Danny had long viewed the moment he'd started to see himself as a man, an adult, to be the point in time where he had sworn to himself that he wouldn't ever lose his temper with his family. He wouldn't pass that on to his child the way his father had to him. He had never broken that oath with Taylor, and knowing that was what kept him contained in his room, pacing back and forth, red in the face and wanting to punch something. While he'd never gotten angry at her, never screamed at her, he knew Taylor had seen him angry. Once, he had been at work, talking to a mayor's aide. The man had told Danny that the revival projects for the docks were being cancelled, and that, contrary to promises, there were to be layoffs rather than new jobs for the already beleaguered dock workers. Taylor had been spending the afternoon in the morning in his office. Taylor had been spending the morning in his office on the promise that they would go out for the afternoon, and had been in a position to see him fly off the handle in the worst way with the man. 4 years ago, he had lost his temper with Annette for the first time, breaking his oath to himself. That had been the last time he had seen her. By the way, I find it interesting that it's implied here that Annette, left, but it's never, that Annette left Danny for this, but that's absolutely not what happened. Taylor hadn't been there to see him shouting at her mother, but he was fairly certain she'd heard some of it. It shamed him. But yeah. Funny how Danny was originally assigned to be QA's host just before it decided to jump ship. Yep. Man, oh man. The word of God on Danny getting cute Queen Administrator is one of the things that makes me actually genuinely mad and upset, because it just pushes him even further into the neglect of Taylor and becoming a supervillain. And it's oh man, god damn it. Also, Danny becomes the giant rat who makes all the rules. So there is that, but man, oh man, I feel like I have to commend Wildbow for making this chapter feel so completely realistic in terms of how here's the thing. Writing one character realistic, writing Taylor and how she deals with the bullying in a realistic way is pretty great. Because it's okay, the way that Taylor's bullying is written and the way that Taylor facing it and her mentality towards it is written is already pretty amazing. But just in this chapter with this interlude, Wildbow makes it clear that he can write more than just a character like Taylor realistically. He can also write Danny in a really realistic way, where it's like, hey, this is essentially what it's like being the parent in this situation, and it feels so real. Like how he goes back and forth between anger and like between feeling upset and worried for her is so great. The image of him pacing back and forth in his room, angry enough to punch something, it's like it feels so realistic and so human that like I just you have to give Waba props for it, and it keeps the shit up for several more interludes after this with a bunch of different characters, and it's amazing, including a dog and an alien. What else is there? What else are the weird ones? There's a dog. There's an interlude from the perspective of an alien. Um, I don't remember what any of the others were. Any of the other really big ones. I'm blanking on that, but um, yeah. He had never broken that oath with Taylor, and knowing that was what kept him. Okay, I already read that. I wish Ward had a dog interlude. Ward has a goblin interlude though. Yeah, he's not. Well, I don't know. He keeps to himself a lot, but I don't think he's a parent. He doesn't seem like he's not like a really social type from what I've heard of him. The powered dog from Valkyrie's interlude. I don't know, man. That dog had no goddamn clue what it was doing. By the way. All right. The third and last time he had lost his temper, where Taylor had been in a position to know, had been when she had been hospitalized following the incident in January. He'd screamed at the school's principal, who had deserved it, and then at Taylor's then biology teacher, who probably hadn't. It had been. Do we know who Taylor's biology teacher is? Oh, it's also then biology teacher, so probably not. Yeah, yeah. It had been bad enough that a nurse had threatened to call for a police officer, and Danny, barely mollified, had stomped from the hallway to the hospital room to find his daughter more or less conscious and wide-eyed in reaction. Danny harbored a fear that the reason Taylor hadn't offered any details on the bullying was out of fear that he would, in blind rage, do something about it. It made him feel sick, the notion that he might have contributed something to his daughter's self-imposed isolation and how she was dealing with her problems. He's written about the difficulties of dating in a small town where there are only two women with online dating profiles, one of whom is a white supremacist. Oh no. I didn't know about that. It took Danny a long time to calm down, helped by telling himself over and over that Taylor was okay, that she was home, that she was safe. He's somewhere up in Canada, man. It was something of a blessing that, as the anger faded, he felt drained. He climbed into the left side of the bed, leaving the right side empty out of a habit he'd yet to break, and pulled the covers up around himself. He would talk to Taylor in the morning, get an answer of some sort. He dreamed of the ocean. By the way, I just love this line. I don't think I love it for any particular reason other than just it's so great because it feels like it has this massive contrast to everything else that was up to this point, where it's like he's so stressed and so like angry and so tense, and then he goes to sleep and he dreams of the ocean, which is symbolically this really peaceful, lax thing. Also, I don't think I mentioned this before, but whenever I think in my head about how I would handle a worm adaptation, I always considered naming like if I had to name like sagas of worm, I would name arcs 1 through 8 drowning, because holy shit, there's a lot of implications you can go with there. Like, did he dream of the? Oh yeah, that's probably it. Actually, is the idea of Cyan first appearing on a cruise ship in the middle of the ocean, and then he dreams of the ocean. Ocean is a metaphor for overwhelming, out of control, as well as potentially peaceful. Yeah. Also, Foreshadowing for Arc 8 begins here. Sveta Danny parallels. There are, though! The whole anger thing and the idea, and Sveta's freaking hell. Freaking hell. I just like the line. I always liked it ever since I first read it. I thought it was like, I just like it because it's just so like completely tagged to Taylor's dad. But I like it because it's just so it's just got that contrast, you know? Here we go. Here we go. Insinuation. Also, Insinuation is really one of the first. It's one of the only arc titles I can think of where I can't immediately make the bug connection, which is weird. But man, oh man, let's go, let's go. WrestleMania sign is up. Taylor versus Bitch. I woke to the muffled sound of the radio in the bathroom. Reaching over to my alarm clock, I turned it around. 6:28. Which made today a weekday like any other. My alarm was set for 6:30, but I almost never needed it, because my dad was always in the shower at the same time. Routines defined us. As a wave of fatigue swept over me, I wondered if I might be sick. It took me a few moments of staring up at this. By the way, I actually really like the transition here, where we go from Danny sleeping to Taylor waking up. That's just a really neat little transition of like it feels very natural, you know? As a wave of fatigue swept over me, I wondered if I might be sick. It took me a few moments of staring up at the ceiling to remember the events of last night. Small wonder I was tired. I'd gotten home, snuck inside, and gone to bed at close to 3:30, just 3 hours ago. With all that had happened, I hadn't slept those full 3 hours either. I forced myself out of bed. As a slave to my routine, it would be wrong to do otherwise. I made myself change into sweats and walked down to the kitchen sink to wash my face, fighting to keep awake. I was sitting at the kitchen table, pulling on my sneakers, when my dad came downstairs in his bathrobe. My dad is not what you'd call an attractive man. Beanpole thin, weak chin, thinning dark hair that was on the cusp of baldness, big eyes, and glasses that magnified those eyes further. As he entered the kitchen, he looked surprised to see me there. That's just the way my dad always looked, constantly bewildered. That and a little defeated. Man, oh man. Taylor's brutal with her with her description of characters sometimes. Good morning, kiddo, he said, entering the kitchen and leaning down to kiss the crown of my head. Hey, Dad. He was already stepping towards the fridge as I replied. He looked over his shoulder. A little glum? Huh? You sound down, he said. I shook my head. Tired. I didn't sleep well. There was the slap of bacon hitting the frying pan. That line has such a great feel to it of action, even though it's just bacon. But it's like, man, you can feel that Danny. You could feel that Danny reacts to that by just that sentence. You can feel that Danny's like, she's lying to me now. It was sizzling by the time he spoke. You know, you could go back to bed, sleep in for another hour or so. You don't have to go on your run. I smiled. It was equal parts annoying and sweet that my dad hated me running. He worried about my safety and couldn't turn down a chance to drop hints that I should stop, or be safer, or join a gym. I wasn't sure if he'd worry more or less if I told him about my powers. You know I go, Dad. If I don't go today, it'll be that much harder to make myself get up and do it tomorrow. Striker power that makes all of your slaps sound like bacon hitting the frying pan. I've got the tube of pepper spray in my pocket, I said. He bobbed his head in acknowledgement. It was only the moments later that I realized I didn't have it. The pepper spray was with my costume in the coal chute in the basement. I felt a pang of guilt at realizing I'd lied to my dad. Also, I think Worm pointed this out, but man, is it great that Taylor feels a pang of guilt at lying to her dad about the pepper spray, but not about any of the other stuff. She doesn't feel pain of guilt about hiding the fact that she's a superhero. She doesn't feel guilty about hiding things from him. It's just when she outright lies to him about something that she goes, oh shit. OJ? He asked. I'll get it, I said, heading to the fridge for the orange juice. While I was at the fridge, I also grabbed some applesauce. As I returned to the table, my dad slapped some French toast on the frying pan to join the bacon. He's slapping things on that pan. Taylor is the only one written in first person in the entire book. And that same goes for all Wild West stories. Only the protagonist is written in first person. All other protagonists are written in third person during their interludes. With the exception of Victoria's shard in Ward. Wait, shit, that's a massive Ward spoiler. Ignore I said that. I like that the protagonist isn't written in the first person in the final epilogue. Oh yeah, that's true. Well, that's because it's well, that's to hide it. But yeah, I like that too. Honestly, it's just great how it's hidden from you. It kind of indicates that removing her shard has made her a different person. Oh, yeah, that's cool. I'll get it, I said, heading to the fridge for the orange juice. While I was at the fridge, okay, applesauce, got it. Do you know Jerry? My dad asked. I shrugged. You met him once or twice when you visited me at work. Big guy, burly, black Irish. Shrugging again, I took a bite of French toast. My dad was part of the Dock Workers Association, as the union spokesperson and head of hiring. With the state of the docks being what they were, that meant my dad was pretty much in charge of telling everyone that there would be no jobs to be had, day after day. Rumors going around he found work. Guess with who? Dunno, I said, around a mouthful of food. He's going to be one of Uber and Leet's henchmen. I raised my eyebrows. Uber and Leet were local villains with a video game theme. They were pretty much as incompetent as villains could be while staying out of jail. They barely even rated as B-list. They're going to make him wear a uniform, bright primary colors, Tron style? My dad chuckled. Probably. Yeah. Uber and Leet are really weird. You know what Uber and Leet are? Hang on. Frickin' what's the name of it? I need to remember the frickin' name of it. Frickin' hang on, yeah. Control Alt Delete comic. Uber and Leet are this personified. This fucking stupid comic that people make fun of all the time is the freaking like hey gamers, stop being oppressed. This is them. This is Uber and Leet is right here. Oh no, it's not the image. It's the Wikipedia page. Hang on. This is an actual picture of what Uber and Leet look like. Okay. I raised my eyebrows. Uber and Leet were local villains with a video game theme. They were pretty much as incompetent as villains could be while staying out of jail. They barely even rated as B-list. Yeah, okay, yeah. My dad chuckled. Probably. We're supposed to talk about how the powers thing has influenced our lives in class today. Maybe I'll mention that. Damn it. Also, I really like the casual discussion of a friend of theirs joining and being the henchman of supervillains. Like, it's just like freaking yeah. Trainwreck is one example I'd like to see more of, though he eventually got absorbed into the Merchants. Yeah. Man, freaking Leet's weird because I think Leet is actually one of the top tier characters if he had just put more planning into place once he figured out how his power worked. Like, holy shit, if Leet had been way smarter, he could have become a fucking A-lister, no problem. We're supposed to, yeah, wait in silence for a minute or two. I heard you come in late last night, he said. I guess gave him a small nod and took another bite of French toast, even as my heart rate tripled and my mind searched for excuses. Like I said, I finally opened my mouth, looking down at my plate. I just couldn't sleep. I couldn't get my thoughts to settle down. I got out of bed and tried pacing, but it didn't help. So I stepped outside and walked around the neighborhood. Lee did catch on quicker than some people would have, per word of God. The casual nature of that conversation might imply that Danny's political ideas are actually somewhat responsible for Taylor's approach to superheroing, particularly her natural inclination against the Protectorate wards. Yeah, a little. Yeah. Well, like it's an interesting point because he's in this like dying industry, and all of his and all these people that he cares about are like basically like at a point where they can't find work and they're trying to find work elsewhere. And you're in Brockton Bay, the place where all of the supervillains are hiring, and it's like, well, might as well, you know. But man, oh man, is it a bad idea for some gangs? Don't join the ABB. Um, like I said, I finally opened my mouth, looking down at my plate. I just couldn't sleep. Yeah, yeah. I wasn't totally lying. I'd had nights like that. Last night just hadn't been one of them, and I had gone walking around the neighborhood, even if it was in a different way than I'd implied. Christ, Taylor, my father answered. This isn't the kind of area where you can walk around in the middle of the night. I had the pepper spray, I protested lamely. That wasn't a lie, at least. What if you get caught off guard? What if the guy has a knife or a gun? My father asked. Or pyrokinesis and the ability to grow armor plating and claws? I felt a little knot of ugliness in the pit of my stomach at my father's concern for me. It was all the more intense because it was so justified. I had almost died last night. What's going on that has you so anxious you can't sleep? He questioned me. School, I said, swallowing around a lump in my throat. Friends, the lack thereof. It's not better? He asked, carefully stepping around the elephant in the room, the bullies. If it was, I wouldn't be having problems, would I? I just gave him a one-shoulder shrug and forced myself to take another bite of French toast. My shoulder twinged a little, as it made the bruises from last night felt. As much as I didn't like eating, I knew my stomach would be growling at me before lunch if I didn't. That was even without accounting for the energy I burned running, let alone the escapades of last night. This is basically a shitpost, but what if instead of attacking Lana, Taylor just popped her head in and said, "Hey, I'm a new superhero. Are you planning to do something bad?" Yeah, yeah. And when my dad realized I didn't have an answer for him, he resumed eating. He had had one bite before he put his fork down again with a clink on the plate. No more going out in the middle of the night, he said, or I'm putting a bell on the doors. He would, too. I just nodded and promised myself I would be more careful. When I had come in, I had been so tired and sore that I hadn't given any thought to the click of the door, the rattle of the lock, or the creaks of floorboards that were older than me. Okay, I said, adding, I'm sorry. Even with that, I felt a twinge of guilt. My apology was sincere and healing, but I was making it with the knowledge that I would probably do the same thing again. It felt wrong. He gave me a smile that almost seemed like an unspoken, I'm sorry too. I finished off my plate and stood up to put it in the sink and run water over it. Going on your run? Yeah, I said. Put my dishes in the beaten up old dishwasher and bent down to give my dad a hug on my way to the door. Taylor, have you been smoking? I shook my head. Your hair is, burnt at the ends there. I thought back to the previous night, getting hit in the back by one of Lung's blasts of flame. Shrugging, I suggested, stove, maybe? Be safe, my dad said, emphasizing each word. I took that as my cue to go, heading out to the side door and breaking into an all-out run the moment I was past the chain-link gate at the side of the house. You think Taylor does the pillow dummy in the bed in case Dad gets suspicious and peeks into the room thing, but with bugs instead of pillows? Freaking hell. And so begins the beginning of beats where you feel like, what the fuck, Danny? You have to realize your daughter is a superhero eventually, right? which will be a running theme up until we get to like later arcs. But man, oh man, I actually really love how it's written because he never shows any sign that he knows, but we know about how he thinks about things from his interlude, and when freaking at the end when it's revealed when it's revealed to him and her identity is made public and all that shit, his response being like no, yes, I don't know, is like one of the best things. I love it because it's like it's not a solid answer one way or the other, but it's like you can tell it's like he knew something was up. What if Emma had figured it out like around arc 4? Man, that would be bad. Like holy shit. Well, if Emma figures it out, then Sophia would know, and then the PRT would know. Although they don't act on identities like that, but fucking hell, that wouldn't stop Sophia. He brought up the whole villain superhero conversation today. Yeah, but I don't think he knows until he sees the burnt hair, and then it's like, well, maybe he could have figured it out here, but it becomes way more obvious as time goes on. But not quite up. The most obvious I think it gets is when she returns home after having been gone like forever, and like there's a freaking she gets in arguments with people about no, the supervillains are really good, you guys. They're totally justified and everything. The run had helped to wake me up, as did the hot shower and a cup of coffee my dad had left in the pot. Even so, the fatigue didn't. That's actually one of my favorite things to think about. Just imagine like the people Taylor was debating with in that chapter after they learned that Taylor was Skinner, and they're like, "Oh shit, I was debating with Skinner then. I don't know how to feel about that." Okay, the run had helped to wake me up, as did the hot shower and a cup of coffee my dad had left in the pot. Even so, the fatigue didn't help the feeling of disorientation over just how normal the day seemed as I made my way to school. Just a matter of hours ago, I had been in a life and death fight. I had even met Armsmaster. Now it was a day like any other. I felt a bit nervous as I got to my homeroom. Having basically skipped 2 classes the previous Friday, failing to turn in a major assignment, I figured that Miss Knott probably knew already. I didn't feel relieved when Miss Knott glanced up at me, or Mrs. Knott glanced up at me and gave me a tight smile before turning her attention back to the computer. That just meant the humiliation would be redoubled if and when class was interrupted by someone coming down from the office. A part of me just wanted to miss this class too, just to avoid the potential humiliation and avoid drawing attention. All in all, I felt anxious as I made my way to my computer, which kind of sucked because computer class was one of the few parts of the school day I didn't usually dread. For one thing, it was the one class in which I was doing well. More to the point, neither Madison, Sophia, nor Emma were in this class, though some of their friends were. Those girls didn't usually feel the need to harass me without the trio around, and I was further removed from them because I was in the advanced stream of the class. A good 3/4 of the people in the room were computer illiterate, being from families that didn't have the money for computers or families that didn't have much interest in the things. So they practiced typing without looking at the keyboard and had lessons in using search engines. By contrast, I was in the group that was learning some basic programming in spreadsheets. It didn't do a lot for my already geeky reputation, but I could deal. Mrs. Knott was an all-right teacher, if not the most hands-on. She was usually content to give us advanced students an in-class assignment, and then focus on the more rambunctious majority of the rest of the class. This suited me just fine. I usually wrapped up on the assignment in a half hour, leaving me an hour to use as I saw fit. I had been recalling and going over the events of the previous night during my morning run, and the first thing that I did with the ancient desktop finished its agonizing load process was to start digging for information. Now this is something I really like about it. Now that we're in Arc 2, we're starting to get some of the more unique aspects of the Worm universe, and one of my favorite things is superhero Wikipedia, which we're about to be getting into. The go-to place for news and discussion on capes was Parahumans Online. The front page had constant updates on recent international news featuring capes. From there, I could go to the wiki, where there was information on individual capes, groups, and events, or to the message boards, which broke down into nearly 100 subboards for specific cities and capes. I opened the wiki on one tab, then found and opened the message board for Brockton Bay in another. I love this wiki walk bit in this chapter, and it'd be more cute if there was more of that. I like PHO interludes, but I kind of wish PHO wiki walks were more of a worm fanfic trope. Yeah, I really like that we don't get an overuse of the PHO in Worm and Ward. Like in Worm, we only really get like one or two PHO interludes during one is the Taylor. I think that we get one during the whole. We get like a brief PHO segment during the whole Taylor being outing herself thing. Though I could be wrong about that. And then the other one is the Behemoth fight. But man, oh man, is it great! Like it's great because it's sparse, and I feel like a lot of Worm fanfics they try to just put a PHO interlude in everything, and it's just like no, man, you're overusing it. You're taking the thing that was great and you're making it not great. And then in Ward, we only get it for Glowworm, and I love Glowworm so much. And it's so different. It's so different from what it is in Worm that it's just like great. It's like this is a completely different world, and it's really helpful to have a look at what the internet is like now that we're on Gimel and not that. It'd be really neat to see a serious Worm fanfic literally epic that's just entirely set on PHO. There was a story I read once called Meta, and that story had a lot of problems. But the PHO segments in that story were really good. And I liked them a lot. But the rest of the story was just like, what the fuck is going on? This is nonsense. All right. Also, I haven't read or listened to it, but Vermont Stretch Radio might be your thing if you want to get into something like that. I've heard really good things about that from what I've seen of it. The go-to place for news and discussion on cases Paradise Online. Yeah. I had the sense that either Tattletale or Gru were the leader of the group I had run into. Turning my attention to Tattletale, I searched the wiki. This is one of my favorite things, is that Taylor's like, okay, I ran into a bunch of supervillains the other day. Let's look at their wiki pages. And it's like, yeah, that's so smart. That's what anyone would do in this situation, is like, okay, hey, here's some supervillains, let's Google them. The result I got was disappointingly short, starting with a header reading, "This article is a stub. Be a hero and help us expand it." Also, this is so great. It's like, oh man. I forgot about that. That's so good. Be a hero and help us expand it it feels like such a realistic, like this is what it would be like in this world. It's like making jokes about, hey, be a hero and help us expand the article. There was one sentence blurb on how she was an alleged villain active in Brockton Bay, with a single blurry picture. The only new information for me was that her costume was lavender. A search of the message boards turned up absolutely nothing. There wasn't even a hint as to what her power was. Face when you hear about this really scary villainess called Contessa, so you decide to Google her, and this Italian woman in a fedora appears in your room, taps you sternly on the shoulder, and says, "Hey, don't do that," then leaves. Yeah. Although I think that most people know her by the name the Boogeyman. But yeah, or like you just bought Cauldron Powers, and you're like, hey, I wonder about that woman in the fedora. So you you Google fedora wearing cape, and she's just there, and she's like, nope, I looked up Gru. There was actually information about him, but nothing detailed or definitive. The wiki stated he had been active for nearly 3 years, dealing in petty crimes such as robbing small stores and doing some work as an enforcer for those who wanted a little superpowered muscle along for a job. Recently, he had turned to higher scale crime, including corporate theft and robbing a casino together with his new team. His power was listed as Darkness Generation in the sidebar under his picture. The picture seemed crisp enough, but the focus of it, Gru, with just a blurry black silhouette in the center. I searched for bitch next. No results. I did another search for a more official title, Hellhound, and got a wealth of information. Rachel Lynn had never made any real attempt to hide her identity. She had apparently been homeless through most of her criminal career, just living on the streets and moving on whenever police or a cape came after her. The sightings and encounters with the homeless girl ended about a year ago. I figured that was when she joined forces with Gru, Tattletale, and Regent. The picture in the sidebar was taken from surveillance camera footage. An unmasked, dark-haired girl who I wouldn't have called pretty. It's interesting. I always imagined Rachel as a blonde, but now I know that she's got dark hair. Maybe she has like brown hair, like dark brown hair. I don't know. She had a squarish, blunt-featured face with thick eyebrows. She was riding atop one of her monstrous dogs like a jockey rides a horse, down the middle lane of a street. Bitch should name one of her powered henchmen Hellhound to really fuck with the heroes. According to the wiki entry, her powers manifest when she was 14, followed almost immediately. By the way, I can see what people are talking about worm paragraphs being really long. And I'm wondering how long it takes, because I know I read like Golem's interlude like a while back before I started doing these streams, and it read just like a Ward chapter, like a Ward interlude. So I'm wondering when the paragraphs start shortening up. According to the wiki entry, her powers manifested when she was 14, followed almost immediately by her demolishing the foster home she had been living in, injuring her foster mother and 2 other foster children in the process. This was followed by a 2-year series of skirmishes and retreats across Maine, as various heroes and teams tried to apprehend her, and she either defeated them or successfully evaded capture. She had no powers that would have made her any stronger or faster than the average Jane, but she was apparently able to turn ordinary dogs into the creatures I had seen on the rooftop. Monsters the size of a car, all muscle, bone, fang, and claw. A red box near the bottom of the page read, Rachel Lynn has a public identity, but is known to be particularly hostile, antisocial, and violent. If recognized, do not approach or provoke. Leave the area and notify authorities as to her last known location. At the very bottom of the page was a list of links that were related to her, 2 fan sites, and a news article relating to her early activities. A search of the message boards turned up too many results, leaving me unable to sift through the crap, the arguments, the speculation, and the villain worship to find any genuine morsels of information. If nothing else, she was notorious. I cited and moved on, making a mental note to do more investigation when I had the time. This really, I like the idea that villains have fans too, and that because that's like totally like there'd be some people, but it's like it feels like it's way worse of it like idea, but man, it just makes you think how many fans did Taylor have when she was Skinner, and how many of those fans got into massive debates about Skinner versus Weaver and about whether or not she should be a hero or a villain. Just says that Rollo had torn through them. Yeah. Is this public story censored? Because I seriously remembered from Rachel that the trigger effect got her foster mother and some of the people killed. Yeah. I was thinking that too. Like, it specifically made a big point later on where Armchester is like, they're murderers. Some of them are murderers. And it's like, yeah. At the very bottom of the page was a list of links that were related to her. 2 fans like, yeah. I sighed and moved on, making a mental note to do more investigation when I had the time. The last member of the group was Regent. Given what Armchester had said about the guy being low profile, I didn't expect to find much. I was surprised to find less than that. Nothing. My search on the wiki turned up only a default response. There are no results matching this query. 32 unique IP addresses have searched the parahumans.net wiki for Regent in 2011. Would you like to create the page? The message board didn't turn up anything else. I even did a search for alternate spellings of the name, such as Regents and Recant, in case I heard it wrong. Nothing turned up. If my mood had been on the sour side as I got to homeroom, the dead ends only made it worse. I turned my attention to the in-class assignment, making a working calculator in Visual Basic, but it was too trivial to distract me. The work from Thursday and Friday had already given us the tools to do the job, so it was really just busy work. I didn't mind learning stuff, but work for the sake of doing work was annoying. I did the bare minimum, checked it for any bugs, moved the file to the completed work folder, and returned to surfing the web. All in all, the work barely took 15 minutes. I looked up Lung on the wiki, which I had done often enough before as part of my research in preparation for being a superhero. I wanted to be sure I knew who prominent local villains were and what they could do. The search for Lung redirected to a catch-all page on his gang, the ABB, with quite a bit of detailed information. The information on Lung's powers were pretty in line with my own experience, though there was no mention of the super hearing or him being fireproof. I debated adding it, but I decided against it. There were security concerns with my submission being tracked back to Winslow High, and then to me. I figured it would probably be deleted as unsupported speculation, anyways. The section beneath the description of Lung and his powers covered his subordinates. He was esteemed to have 40 or 50 thugs working for him across Brockton Bay, largely drawn from the ranks of Asian youth. It was pretty unconventional for a gang to include members of the variety of nationalities that the ABB did, but Lung had made it a mission to conquer and absorb every gang with Asian members and many without. Once he had the manpower he needed, the non-Asian gangs were cannibalized for assets, their members discarded. Even though there were no major gangs in the east end of town to absorb, he was still recruiting zealously. His method now was to go after anyone older than 12 and younger than 60. It didn't matter if you were a gang member or not. If you were an Asian and you lived in Brockton Bay, Lung and his people expected you to either join or to pay tribute one way or another. There had been local news reports on it, newspaper articles, and I could remember seeing signs in the guidance counselor's office detailing where people who were targeted in this way could go for help. Lung's lieutenants were listed as Oni Lee and Bakuda. I already had some general knowledge about Oni Lee, but I was intrigued to see there were recent updates to his wiki entry. There were specific details on his powers. He could teleport, but when he did so, he didn't disappear. As he teleported, his original self, for lack of a better term, would stay where it was and remain active for 5 to 10 seconds before disintegrating into a cloud of carbon ash. Yeah, his power is so great. As a character, I don't know. I'm going to agree with Jack Slash to say Oni is a bit boring, but yeah. Oni Lee's got some interesting things about him, but I don't know. I like Bakuda better than Oni Lee as a character, and I'm glad we got to see more of Bakuda than him. Coil Sniper Man. Essentially, he could create another version of himself anywhere nearby, while the old version would stick around long enough to distract or attack you. If that wasn't scary enough, there was a report of him holding a grenade in his hand as he repeatedly duplicated himself, with his short-lived duplicates acting as suicide bombers. Topping it all off, a blank slate as Jack Slid. Fucking foreshadowing there, holy shit. Topping it all off, Oni Lee's wiki page had a similar red warning box to the one that Bitch Hellhound had on hers, minus the bit about his public identity. From what they knew about him, authorities had seen fit to note him a sociopath. The warning covered the same essential elements: exceedingly violent, dangerous to approach, should not be provoked, and so on. I glanced at his picture. His costume consisted of a black bodysuit with a black bandolier and a belt for his knives, guns, and grenades. The only color on him was an ornate Japanese-style demon mask, crimson with 2 green stripes down either side. Except for the mask, his costume gave off the distinct impression of a ninja, which just added weight to the notion that this was a guy who could and would slide a knife between your ribs. I really doubt that Oni's power would actually gradually lobotomize him, which makes me wonder whether Jack was just talking out of his ass, or if Oni was just using his power fundamentally wrong, or would actually gradually lobotomize him by design. That's true. Maybe he is a cauldron cape. Has that been confirmed? Has it been confirmed whether or not Oni Lee is a natural cape or a cauldron cape? Because that would explain it. Alright. Bakudo was a new entry added to the ABB wiki page just 10 days ago. Here's another thing I like. I like that Taylor's not just Googling all the underside. She's Googling every single villain she met. Everyone. Arms Master even. Just every cape that I met that night. Let's Google them. Let's read their wiki pages. And it's like great. It's not just getting more info on the Undersiders. It's getting more info on everyone. And it helps build the world out, but it also feels like this is a more realistic thing you would do. You know, it doesn't feel like it's just there to serve the purpose of I'm going to give the readers more information on the Undersiders. Bakudo was a new entry added to the ABB wiki page just 10 days ago. It's kind of silly in retrospect how little Taylor knows about the local villains to begin with, giving all her months of hero pre-planning. Yeah, a little. It's kind of silly that Taylor doesn't know what a trigger event is, but it helps the readers out a lot because it makes it much easier to read through Worm when she doesn't. If she had not known about Endbringers, that would have been too much. Like that on its own would have been like, no, fuck you. There's no way Taylor didn't know about that. I feel like it's just enough that it's like, okay, I can suspend my disbelief a little here. My theory is that basically killing himself every time he uses his power takes a toll on him mentally, causing him to become way more jaded, but not actually affecting his brain physically. Pretty sure Wildbow's actually said this trigger introduction is going to be slightly different in the edit. Has he done that already? Yeah, maybe. Yeah, that's one thing he said. I don't know about the edit, to be honest. But hasn't he gotten there already? He retconned Browbeat. Doesn't that mean the edit's at freaking Arc 8 already? I don't know, man. Bakudo was a new entry added to the ABB wiki just 10 days ago. The picture only showed her from the shoulders up. A girl with straight black hair, large opaque goggles over her eyes, and a metal mask with a gas mask style filter covering the lower half of her face. No, the Browbeat thing was a spur of the moment. The fans are irritating me, so time to flex my retcon skills thing. I mean, to be honest, it doesn't change a lot, but it's very worrying that you can just retcon whether or not a character lives or dies. And that he did it more. He did it. It doesn't just affect Arc 8. It also affects like him showing up in later arcs, like in the Echidna fight. That's the part that really gets me. Is that it's just gone now from the Echidna fight. Browbeat just wasn't there anymore. A braided cord of black, yellow, and green wires lopped over one of her shoulders. I couldn't pinpoint her ethnicity with the mask and goggles, and her age wasn't any easier to figure out. But she's probably Japanese because her name's Japanese for bomb. So, I don't know. Killer Queen! Daison no Bakedan! The wiki had a lot of the same details Armsmaster had mentioned to me. Bakuda actually essentially held a university ransom, and she did it with her superhuman ability to design and fabricate high-tech bombs. There was a link to a video titled Bomb Threat at Cornell, but I didn't think it wise to play it in school, especially without headphones. I made a mental note to check it out when I got home. I had some extremely fucking rad plans for a Browbeat one-shot. Really looking forward to writing it soon. Damn. The next thing that caught my eye was the section heading titled Defeats and Captures. I scrolled down to read it. According to the wiki, Lung had apparently suffered a number of minor defeats at the hands of various teams, ranging from the Guild. Whoa! I didn't expect to see that name this early on in the story. Okay, so yeah, the Guild is still a thing this early on. It isn't just the Protectorate's in Canada, the Guild is there too. To the local teams of New Wave, the Wards, and the Protectorate, but consistently managed to evade capture until last night. A blurb read, Armsmaster successfully ambushed and defeated the leader of the ABB, who was weakened from a recent encounter with a rival gang. Lung was taken to the PHQ for holding until the villain's trial by teleconference. Given Lung's extensive and well-documented criminal history, it is expected he will face imprisonment in the birdcage should he be found guilty at the trial. And there's the birdcage, too. I don't remember if that was mentioned earlier. I think it was mentioned in Arc 1. Maybe. But man, oh man. Yeah, Arc 2 is really big on the world building. And this is what I mean. Like Arc 1 is more of an establishment of Taylor as a character. Arc 2 feels like more of an establishment on the world. And I actually come to think of it, I feel like you can see the same pattern in Ward, where Arc 1 feels like an establishment of Victoria as Taylor as a character, and Arc 2 feels like an establishment of what the status of the world is. I didn't notice this until like a few days ago, but I think it's hilarious how Armchester didn't actually do what he said he would. He didn't take credit from Taylor for himself. He gave Taylor's credit to the Undersiders. What the fuck, Colin? I wonder how legit Armchester's advice to Taylor that he should take the credit for Lung's arrest was in retrospect. Yeah. Well, I think it was pretty fucking legit. I genuinely believe that Taylor would have fucking died if it had gotten out. Like, she would be right now being under Bakuta's radar, pretty much. Like, sure, there's not a lot to go on her identity, so it's not like Bakuta's gonna be attacking her out of costume, but, like, she would have gone after the Undersiders soon. Well, no. Because she went after them right after the bank robbery anyways, now that I think about it. So, maybe, given the way things actually turned out with Lung escaping and Bakuta knowing that about Taylor, it's pretty much impossible to tell. But I'm pretty sure that if Lung hadn't escaped, Taylor taking credit would have been the worst option by far. Because that Bakuta fight is insane. They freaking almost get trapped in a time bubble, man. I took a deep breath and let it out slowly. I wasn't sure what to think. By all rights, I could have been angry that Armchester took the credit for the fight that could have cost me my life. Instead, I felt a building excitement. I felt like shaking the shoulder of the guy sitting next to me and pointing to the screen, saying, "Me! I made that possible. Me!" With a renewed enthusiasm, I switched tabs to the message board and began looking to see what people were saying about it. A post by a fan or minion of Lung threatened violence against Armchester. And yeah, there you go. There was a request by someone asking for more information on the fight. I was given pause by one post that asked whether Bakuta could or would use a large-scale bomb, and the threat of potentially thousands or hundreds of thousands dead to ransom Lung back. Honestly find it pretty surprising that Lung has fans. Nah. It's not as surprising, I don't think. I mean, it's like you'd find fans of anyone. You could find people who support the mindset of anyone given time. Given the context of a whole world. Also, Lung went toe to toe with fucking Leviathan in Kyushu, so he probably got a bit of a fan base from that. I tried to put that out of my mind. If it that would have only been capes, but still. If it happened, it would be the responsibility of heroes better and more experienced than I. It struck me that there was one person I hadn't looked for. Myself. I opened up the advanced search page for the parahuman.net message board and did a search for multiple terms. I included insect, spider, swarm, bug, plague, and a mess of other terms that had struck me when I had been trying to brainstorm a good hero name. I narrowed the time frame of posts to search for posts that had been made within the past 12 hours and hit search. My efforts turned up 2 posts. One referred to a villain called Pestilence, active in the UK. Apparently Pestilence was one of the people who could use magic. That is, he was if you believed magic was real, and not just some convoluted or diluted interpretation of a given set of powers. The second post was in the connections section of the message board, where rescued damsels left their contact information for their dashing heroes, where conventions and fan gatherings were organized, and where people posted job offers for capes and the cape obsessed. Most were cryptic and vague, referring to stuff only the people in question would know. I love this too. It's just like, holy shit. The idea of damsels being like leaving their contact information for their heroes is so great. The message was simply titled Bug. I clicked it and waited impatiently for the outdated system and overloaded school modem to load up the page. What I got was brief. Subject Bug. OU1. Would like to repay the favor. Meet. Send a message. TT. The post was followed by 2 pages of people commenting. 3 people suggested it was something important, while half a dozen more people decried them as tinfoil hats, fairhumans.net's term for conspiracy theorists. It was meaningful, though. I couldn't interpret it any other way. Tattletale had found a way to get in contact with me. Yeah. Freaking nice. Alright, I've been streaming for an hour and 20 minutes. I'm gonna end the stream here. Chapters are getting longer, I think. But man, oh man, we're getting to the part where things. The thing about Worm, and I think most Wild Book stories in general, Worm and Ward more. I don't know about Pact or Twig because those are different. But the thing about Worm and Ward for me is that the stories tend to get way more interesting for me once the main character joins with the group. And it usually takes a while for good reason. I like that we get a bit of a beginning part where we get to know the main character and we get to know what makes them tick, and we watch them go through their life beforehand because it gives a lot of context for how things have changed completely afterwards. But man, I'm really can't wait for this. So yeah, I'm gonna end the stream here. Thank you all for watching this, but man, oh man. All right. See you guys on Tuesday when I'll be reading the new chapter of Ward. And I'm signing off now.